Hey there, welcome to a special episode of Speaking of. Um, I say special because we're going to do kind of a Christmas theme here. I thought rather than we usually kind of look at contemporary issues, political issues, social issues, and we kind of examine those through a faith-based lens. But I thought it maybe be fun to do just something a little different. We'll look at rather than looking at one of those kinds of issues, I thought maybe we'd look at sort of a bigger topic, which is the overall theme of Christmas. And I kind of decided to do this after an experience not that long ago. I walked into a Starbucks coffee shop and I was going to get myself a cup of coffee. And so, I placed my order with the barista there, and she wished me, she took my name and all that stuff and asked me what I wanted, and I paid, and then I said Merry Christmas, and she looked back at me and she said Happy Holidays. And I felt my face getting really flush, and I felt just the hair on the back of my neck standing up, because how dare she? How dare she say, especially when I said Merry Christmas and she said Happy Holidays. And so I leaned up on the counter and I grabbed her by the shoulders and kind of gave her a little shake. And I said, don't you ever say Happy Holidays again. It's Christmas time, and you'd better make sure that you say Merry Christmas. And I sort of settled her back down, and I wasn't totally proud of myself, but then I went and went to where you pick up my coffee cup, and then I picked up the coffee when it was finally ready, and I noticed on the side of it that it said Merry Christmas, but instead of the word Christ, it was Xmas. And I'd had enough. I took that coffee cup and I threw it on the ground so that everybody could see it splash everywhere, because how dare they take the Christ out of Christmas? Okay, none of that really happened. None of it. So just to be clear. But that's a common theme that we hear around this time of year from Christians. As Christians, we can get really bent out of shape and we can get really upset when we hear people, when we get the sense that people are taking the Christ out of Christmas. And as Christians, I think one of the things that we want to do, we often want to sort of preserve the integrity of Christmas and what it's all about and what it means. And so at any little hint of sort of the idea that maybe Christmas is losing some of its meaning, or its meaning is being changed by the broader culture, we tend to get very angry and we tend to get very defensive. And so we get really fired up about that. And so I thought maybe it would be fun to look at maybe to sort of respond to that a little bit. First, I thought I would handle what I think is the easiest response first. I'm going to just share my screen here a second, because I want to put up a picture. Oops, let's do this picture here. So here's a picture that I'm going to put on the screen. You should be seeing what looks like the letter X. This is actually, it's not the letter X. It's actually the Greek letter chi or chi, depending on how you pronounce it. The reason that this matters is because when in Greek times, or New Testament times, when Greek was commonly spoken, Greek Christians would actually use the Greek letter X, because it's the first letter in the word for Christ. It's the first letter in the name of or the title of Christ. And so what Christians would do is they would actually just substitute the first letter for the entire word. So they would actually talk about being Christians or Christ, and they would substitute the word X for the entire word Christ. And that's a practice that has actually hung around for a very, very long time. So when you see the word Xmas, the last thing in the world that you should be doing is sort of panicking that someone is somehow taking the Christ out of Christmas. In fact, they're intentional or not, they're keeping the Christ in Christmas. They're using a letter that represents the Greek word for Christ, or for Christos. And so that's an easy one, I think, to put to bed. That's an easy misconception. Nobody is taking the Christ out of Christmas when they use the word Xmas instead of Christ. But now I want to go to something that's a little bit more, maybe a little more, a little deeper, a little more challenging. And to do that, I thought it would maybe help to speak to maybe make some observations about how our culture in general has changed with regard to how we celebrate Christmas and what it means. I did just a little bit of digging, and because I was curious, what is it that we really celebrate at this time of year? Like as a culture, the month of December is typically thought of everywhere as the Christmas season. And so whether or not you are a Christian, whether or not you're a believer, many people celebrate Christmas. Not everyone. There are certain corners of society that actually don't participate and are very intentional about not participating. But most of the culture gets swept up in Christmas. And so you hear what we call Christmas music and Christmas songs and all the rest of it. And one of the things I kind of became curious about is what are the songs that are popular, and how has that maybe changed? And so I'm going to put up something on my screen again, if I can pull it up. This is a list. This is Wikipedia, and it's a kind of a record of the most popular Christmas songs of this year, and you can see it's by digital downloads. And so, without analyzing this too much, you can see that Mariah Carey's "All I Want for Christmas Is You," and then "Do You Want to Build a Snowman?" Christmas Eve, Sarajevo, Mistletoe, Rockin' Around the Christmas Tree, Where Are You Christmas, Christmas Canon, Feliz Navidad, Jingle Bell Rock, and Last Christmas. I'll bet that as I was reading those off, at least a few of those suddenly stuck in your brain, and you at least started singing them or hearing them in your brain. What I think is interesting about all of this is a couple things. So these, if the music of our culture and the songs that are popular in our culture really speak to the values of where we are as a culture, then you can see that most of these songs have very little, if anything, to do with the traditional Christmas story, the birth of Jesus, the wise men, the shepherd, the nativity, and all of that. Instead, what they mainly focus on is the things that sort of the secondary things that we associate with Christmas, the things of togetherness, the things of wintertime and snow, sleighs, Santa, some of the myth that has risen up around Christmas, but very few of these songs actually deal with what is traditionally the essence or the substance of the Christmas season, which I think is kind of an interesting thing. I mean, it's sort of like, and the other thing that's maybe worth noting too is that those songs, I took the graphic down, but some of those songs that were popular that we hear, we call Christmas music, they go back 60, 70 years, some of them. And my point in saying that is that the meaning of Christmas, at least as our culture understands it, has been somewhat separated from the source for a very, very long time. Now, let me do one more thing. I'm going to pull up a different top 10 list or popular Christmas list here. And this is the top 10 list, if you will, from the Victorian era. And so you have to go back about 205 years or so. And then here's a whole bunch of these other Christmas songs that were popular throughout the 1800s. So you get more of the well-known Christmas carols that we think of that are more directly tied to the traditional nativity story. So Silent Night, Oh Christmas Tree, that's sort of secondary, but like the First Noel, Oh Holy Night, It Came Upon a Midnight Clear, We Three Kings, Angels We've Heard, probably a good majority of them, not all of them, because you still get you still get Up on the Housetop, which surprisingly is 1864. You get Jingle Bells, 1857. and Oh Christmas Tree, 1824. Those songs are the ones that you look at and you'd say, well, those probably don't directly relate to the traditional Christmas nativity story. And so my point in all of that is to just make the observation that the way that we understand and celebrate Christmas has actually changed quite substantially, but that's been going on. That's not been a very sudden change. That's not any change with any of your lifetime. That's something that probably has happened over the course of at least 120 years or so, maybe even and longer, in some cases as much as 200 years. So you get this shift away from the traditional meaning of Christmas. And so when we get all panicky about, taking the Christ out of Christmas and we're losing the sense of meaning, that's probably an exaggerated concern. It's probably a concern that really is not something we need to be quite as afraid of. Now, that said, this brings me to a question that I want to press upon people who maybe don't celebrate Christmas, or who don't share the traditional Christmas convictions and belief. In other words, for those of you who are watching this and you celebrate Christmas, but you don't believe in anything about the biblical narrative of Christmas, what I want to press on you is the question is, what really are you celebrating? What is it that you are really, what is at the heart of your celebration? And why is it that you're celebrating? In other words, you take this time off from work and you spend time together as a family, and you might give gifts and all of that. You might practice the traditional rituals that are associated with Christmas. But my question for you is why? Why do you do it? What is beneath all of it? Is it what's the reason behind it? And I would press that upon you because, in a sense, what you are doing is you are borrowing from Christian tradition. You are borrowing the capital of Christianity, and you are celebrating, but you've separated the substance from the ritual. You've separated, in other words, you're celebrating the symbols, but you're not really celebrating the substance. And so what is it that you're really left with? Like, what, if you had to explain the meaning of Christmas, what would you come up with? It would, it'd be, is it a celebration of wintertime? Is it snow? Is it, nice Christmas trees and decorations? Is it that the days are shorter and it's kind of cozy indoors, or what? Some people say, well, it's a season for charity and for goodwill and being kind to others. But again, why? Why is it that you do that? Historically, the reason for charity and for generosity was tied to the fact that it's a mirror of the generosity of God shown in Christ. In other words, God is generous in giving what was most precious to him, and Christians have historically used that. They've historically mimicked that in their generosity. But if you don't believe in any of that, then really, what is the point in a season of generosity and giving? And it's not to say you shouldn't do those things. It's really just to ask the question, have you considered what is it beneath that? And I would submit to you that perhaps you're celebrating something, you're celebrating rituals and symbols rather than celebrating the essence of something. Now, to those of you that are Christian and you maybe are at times concerned or worried about the way that the culture has changed. In some ways, I think this can put your mind at ease a little bit. I think because sometimes we have a tendency to sort of exaggerate the nature and the speed of change. And I would say that on the one hand, there's always a concern. We always should have a concern that we lose our focus. And that should always be something that Christians are keen to pay attention to, which is that we want to be sure that we don't lose sight of what this really is all about. And so we shouldn't get swept up in the consumerism. We shouldn't get swept up in sort of the secondary parts of the season without really focusing on the heart of the season, which is the birth of Christ and the incarnation of God in Jesus Christ. But don't panic about this. Don't believe that suddenly, we're in the last, 5 years or 10 years, we've suddenly made this shift and all of a sudden Christ has been pushed off to the margins. None of that has really happened. I would say, you as an individual and as a family and as a church, that's where the focus, that's where we can be putting the focus on the person and work of Jesus Christ. The other thing is to recognize that we live in a pluralistic society, right? In other words, as Christians, we don't live in any sort of Christian nation as we've sometimes been led to believe, or as we've sometimes convinced ourselves. That's a kind of a tricky phrase, but but the fact of the matter is that we don't live with people who all share our basic convictions and our basic beliefs. And so we do share culture and we do share society with, with Jewish people, with Jehovah's Witnesses, with secular people. And so to wish people, I would say go ahead and wish people Merry Christmas. I think there's nothing wrong with that. And I think people should not be offended if they don't celebrate Christmas and someone wishes them Merry Christmas. Like, don't get bent out of shape about that. And at the same time, you should feel free to wish anybody a Merry Christmas that you want, without, feeling shy or bashful about that. You should do that. But just recognize that in a pluralistic society, not everybody, you can't expect that everybody's actually going to be celebrating Christmas, and that's okay. You don't need to get, honest to goodness, there's a lot of other bigger issues to get worked up about and frantic about. So don't be one of these people that jumps over the counter at the Starbucks and yells at the barista because they said Happy Holidays instead of Merry Christmas. So, well, with all that, let me leave you with this. This will be the last episode of Speaking Of for this year. We'll take a couple weeks break and over the Christmas holiday. So I want to leave you with a how about Merry Christmas? Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.